What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Clutch Talk, episode 16 today, and big video today, another ranking video today. We're breaking down who I think will be the top 10 wide receiver rooms in 2025, going from 10 to 1. Super excited for this video today. College football is getting closer. Training camp is underway for a lot of teams, almost every team. Lots of updates. DJ Lagway still injured. Boo Carter at Tennessee not practicing yet. Good, hearing great things about John Mateer, Oklahoma. Hearing great things about that Penn State wide receiver room. Hearing good things about Bryce Underwood. A lot of things going on heading into the season. But today we'll be talking about wide receiver rooms. And then continuing on, next video we'll be breaking down Baylor and Texas A&M season previews, and then getting into more rankings after that. If you're new to the channel and like the content, please subscribe to the channel. It'll help a lot. And yeah, let's get started today. I'm going to start from 10, work my way down to 1. The way I ranked these, I looked at depth of the wide receiver rooms. I looked at the top guys who are the best pass catchers on the roster. I looked at continuity within the systems and with the quarterbacks. And I looked at overall talent and who I think is going to have the most successful season within the wide receiver room. So we're going to start number 10. And at number 10, I have the Georgia Bulldogs out of the SEC. Offense was kind of dysfunctional last year. Under Carson Beck, the receivers didn't really make a lot of plays, lots of drops. Particularly, you could tell early in the Alabama game that was the case. Dillon Bell, top receiver, he's back. He's now probably going to be more the wide receiver 3 or 2 this year, though. 466 yards last year, 4 touchdowns. The big get was from USC, Zachariah Branch, 503 yards and a touchdown last year. Noah Thomas, who was A&M's wide receiver 1 last year, 8 touchdowns, 574 yards, and Landon Humphreys, who transferred in a year ago from Vanderbilt, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns. He'll be the wide receiver 4. This is going to be a very complimentary receiver room, but I think this is the chance for Zachariah Branch to finally break out. He's been a guy that was a highly rated guy at a high school, was highly expected to be productive in Lincoln Riley's offense, didn't quite work out the way people thought it could have at USC, so now he's at Georgia, new start. Georgia has consistently kind of struggled with big-time transfer receivers. Dominic Levitt was the best example of that. And so I think this is their chance now with Noah Thomas and Zachariah Branch to have a very productive wide receiver room. And again, this isn't going to be a 300-yard passing offense either. But I think as a receiver room, as a unit, they are top 10. This is going to be more of a balanced offense this year at Georgia. And again, Gunnar Stockton's throwing the football, which is still a question mark just because we haven't seen a lot of him and we don't know what we're getting out of him necessarily. But I think as a receiver room as a whole, they're top 10. They have potential to be up there, especially if Zachariah Branch has finally the breakout year that we all expect out of him. So they come in at number 10. Number 9, I got kind of an oddball team that I don't think people are expecting to be on here, but it's the Indiana Hoosiers. Elijah Sarrett, who's back as wide receiver 1. He was wide receiver 1 last year, 957 yards and 8 touchdowns, 18 yards per catch. They get Mekhi Jackson from App State, who had a really good year last year, 745 yards, 5 touchdowns. Omar Cooper's back. He had 21 yards per catch and 7 touchdowns. And they get Jonathan Brady out of Cal, who had 366 yards and 3 touchdowns. Another deep wide receiver room, and the top 2 guys could have big years. Elijah Sarrett could have a 1,000-yard season, almost like what he had last year. And Indiana, people are expecting him to come back down to earth after making the playoff last year. I don't see that happening. I think they could still win 8-9 games. One, because the schedule's easy. And number 2, I think Kirk Cignetti's easy to hate on. I understand that. But he's still a very, very good coach, and he's produced at every level he's been at. They're not going to be a playoff team, I don't think, this year, but I think they still could be very good. And that receiver room is going to be a big help to Fernando Mendoza, who's the new starting quarterback over there. I think they're going to be, again, a more pass-heavy team, kind of like what they were last year. I think this receiver room's going to shine, and they're going to be one of the best in the Big Ten. So they come in at number 9. I expect big things from them. Number 8. This one I want to get excited to talk about. Number 8, I have Penn State. Penn State brought in basically a brand new receiver room through transfer portal. Wide receiver 1's going to be Trevor Pina, 941 yards, 9 touchdowns from Syracuse last year. And then they get Devontae Ross out of Troy, 1,000 yards and 11 touchdowns last year. And they get Kyron Hudson as well from USC, who had 462 yards, 2 touchdowns last year, along with Liam Clifford, who will be the 4th receiver in that room. The problem with Penn State the last 5 years has been the question marks around that receiver room and who's going to be the consistent pass catcher. You had Tyler Warren last year, but that's a tight end. They didn't have a consistent wide receiver 1 I think Trevor Pena could be that this year. And then Devontae Ross could be a very good complementary receiver. And Kyron Hudson had his moments last year at USC where he looked like he could be a wide receiver one as well. I think this is the best wide receiver room that Penn State's had in the last 4 years, probably dating back to Chris Godwin. So maybe even 5-6 years, probably dating back to Chris Godwin's. This is the best wide receiver room I think they've had. And I think Drew Aller, this is the best weapons he's had, the most versatile weapons he's had since he's been the quarterback at Penn State. So I expect big things out of them. I think this is his best wide receiver room. And again, this is the proof that I think James Franklin's going all in, because I think Penn State is what we like to call a window. They're in that window of being a national championship team. And after this year, you're losing Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, offensive lineman, Trevor Pena, defensive guys. Like, this is kind of the all-in year, and this is the end of the window. And I think James Franklin proved that by who he got out of the portal for wide receiver, showing that this is the year that they have to go all in. And I think that showed, and I think they're a top 10 wide receiver this season. Number 7, I got the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They're going to need to be a good wide receiver just because C.J. Carr is a new quarterback. He's a redshirt freshman. And with how focused teams are going to be on the run game, I think you have to have a good wide receiver. And Malachi Fields out of Virginia could provide a huge boost. 808 yards last year, 5 touchdowns. Jaden Greathouse is back, a receiver, 592 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think Will Pauling out of Wisconsin. Not many people talk about. He's played a lot of football. This is 5th year college football. 407 yards last year, 3 touchdowns. Very underrated. Get out of the portal. And Jordan Faison will be the wide receiver 4. 4 receivers that could get a lot of snaps and a lot of targets and a lot of catches. And I think, again, with how focused people are on Jeremiah Love, that offensive line, through play action or however Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock want to do it, these receivers are going to end up having to make plays. I think they will. I think it's a very talented receiver room. I think they'll make C.J. Carr's job easier. Now, C.J. Carr still got to get them the football, but I think if he can get them the ball and let the receivers make plays, I think they could still have a very good year. And I think this is a better pass-catching group than what Riley Leonard had last year, which is also a huge help for C.J. Carr. Number 6, I got the Auburn Tigers. This is another very deep receiver room, and this is a young receiver room that I think is ready to break out if Jackson Arnold ends up panning out. Eric Singleton was a huge get out of Georgia Tech, 754 yards, 3 touchdowns. Cam Coleman, going to be a sophomore this year. Remember, he was just a freshman last year and had almost 600 yards and 8 touchdowns last year. Malcolm Simmons, another sophomore, 450 yards, 3 touchdowns. And they get a transfer from Wake Forest and Horatio Fields, 463 yards, 4 touchdowns. Another deep receiver room. Hugh Freeze has been raving about this receiver room. This is what he's kind of recruited around, getting these receivers to make Jackson Arnold's job easier. Again, Jackson Arnold struggled at Oklahoma, and people are just kind of waiting for him to hit his stride and show the talent that he had at a high school. This is the best receiver room he's ever going to have, I think, in his career. I think if he is going to finally break out and finally have a good year and show what the 5-star talent, the Elite 11 MVP was about, he's got to do it because this is an amazing receiver. There's been amazing plays by Eric Singleton at fall camp so far. They think he is the wide receiver one of this team. He could have 1,000 yards receiving. And Cam Coleman is just as talented as any wide receiver in the country, aside from Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams. But he's up there in the top 10, I think, in talented wide receivers. Extremely, extremely talented. And this is a make-or-break year for Auburn. They need to win this year. And it's going to solely rely, to me, on Jackson Arnold in that receiver room. Moving on to number 5. I have the Ole Miss Rebels at number 5. They returned their leading receiver from last year in Caden Lee, 874 yards, 2 touchdowns. They get DeJon Stribling at Oklahoma State, who had 892 yards, 6 touchdowns. They get the leading receiver from Penn State last year at Harrison Wallace, 732 yards, 4 touchdowns. And Deuce Alexander from Wake Forest, 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. Harrison Wallace and DeJon Stribling are wide receiver 1s on their respective teams last year, and they're going to be wide receivers 2 and 3 on Ole Miss's roster. That shows you how deep that receiver room is going to be. And they have 3 wide receiver 1s as their pass catchers, which will make Austin Simmons' job a lot easier, make Lane Kiffin's job a lot easier. And those guys are going to get open. I think this offense will be extremely, extremely explosive. All the 3 receivers that I mentioned as wide receiver 1s all average 15 yards or more per catch. So extremely dynamic. They're going to be in the end zone a lot, rack up a lot of yards. It's going to be more of a pass-heavy offense this year under Lane Kiffin. So expect them to get a lot of targets and a lot of numbers this year at Ole Miss. Number 4, I got the LSU Tigers. Aaron Anderson's obviously wide receiver 1. He was last year at 875 yards and 5 touchdowns. Really talented. Nick Anderson was, like I said in the LSU preview, he was hurt last year. but this season he wasn't hurt just a couple years ago, had 21 yards per catch, that 800 yards and 10 touchdowns from Oklahoma. And Barion Brown, who had 360 yards, 3 touchdowns from Kentucky, had a little bit of a down year last year, but extremely speedy in the open field, a great slot receiver, and I think he'll get the targets he deserves at LSU this year, especially in a more pass-heavy system. And then Xavier Thomas, 218 yards, 2 touchdowns, an extremely talented receiver. Again, I talked about Ole Miss having a lot of wide receiver one guys. Nick Anderson and Barion Brown could have been wide receiver ones on almost any team in the country. I said almost, but almost any team in the country. And they chose to go to Ole Miss, and that's a heck of a 3 wide receiving core. For one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and Garrett Nussmeier, they're going to have a heck of a year. Again, it's also a pass-heavy system. LSU knows they need to run the ball better. I think they will. But they also still have the great weapons on the outside. They still have Garrett Nussmeier at quarterback. They're still going to throw the football around the yard probably 40 times a game sometimes. So those guys are going to get targets. Aaron Anderson, I think, is going to be have a heck of a season. I think the breakout star for them, though, is Nick Anderson. People talk about Barion Brown and Aaron Anderson, and Nick Anderson was hurt last year. But I think he's going to have a monster year this year for LSU as well. Number 3. This may be unpopular because a lot of people have the number 1 wide receiving room, but I'm going with number 3 being Ohio State. Everyone has a number 1, and I get that. Jeremiah Smith is the best wide receiver in college football, point blank, period. 1,300 yards last year, 17 yards a catch, 15 touchdowns. That's insane. He was a true freshman last year. And Carnell Tate is incredibly good as well, 733 yards, 4 touchdowns. And then you have Brandon Inniss, who was a 5-star out of high school, 176 yards and a touchdown. Bryson Rogers, who's a high 4-star at 46 yards last year. The only reason I don't have a number 1 is because Brandon Inniss and Bryson Rogers are still waiting to see what they are in a highly productive role. That's the only reason I don't have them higher. If Brandon Inniss and Bryson Rogers, let's say one of them had 300 yards last year, 400 yards last year, and more proven, I would probably have them number 1. But again, right now, from what it looks like, you have 2 really proven receivers. One of them's the best in college football, and the other 2 are a little inexperienced. That's fair. And again, you have an inexperienced quarterback as well. So I think that'll be interesting to see how those 2 work with the inexperienced quarterback. But Jeremiah Smith has him in the top 3 alone. It could be a bunch of bums in Jeremiah Smith, and I think that still have him top 5. That's how good he is. He is the best wide receiver in college football, point blank, period. So they're coming number 3, a little unpopular, but that's fair. Number 2, I got the Alabama Crimson Tide. Ryan Williams obviously is a headliner. He had 865 yards, 8 touchdowns as a freshman last year. Jeremy Bernard had a sneaky good year last year. He came in from Washington when Kalen DeBoer got hired. He had 794 yards, 2 touchdowns last year. Led the team in receptions actually over Ryan Williams. And they got one of the most underrated transfer gets, in my opinion, out of the portal, and Isaiah Horton from Miami. 616 yards and 5 touchdowns. And they had Cole Adams, who was a freshman last year, 94 yards catching. Isaiah Horton's one of the most underrated gets, like I said, out of the portal. He has potential to have a big year. A big year. And Ryan Williams is just going to get even better. Jeremy Bernard is so used to that Kalen DeBoer system. And now Ryan Grubb's back, so Jeremy Bernard's going to be extra familiar with that system, knowing that Ryan Grubb's back is the play caller. It's going to be a little bit more of a complementary offense, a little bit more play action, I think, and easy throws for Ty Simpson. But I think that's where it's where Alabama's offense could be best, because I think you let Jeremy Bernard and Ryan Williams and Isaiah Horton work in the open field off making the easy throws. It could be a huge year for them. I'm really high on this Alabama team overall, and I'm really high on this wide receiver room. I think they're the second best in the country. So everyone either has Alabama number 2 or Ohio State number 2. I do not. So who could be number 1? Well, I think the number 1 wide receiver room in college football this upcoming season is the Clemson Tigers. The depth, the experience with Cade Klubnik, the familiarity with the system, I think they're the best wide receiver in the country. Antonio Williams is a stud, had 11 touchdowns last year, 900 yards. They get Tristan Smith out of Southeast Missouri University, 934 yards, 6 touchdowns, extremely underrated get. No one's talking about it, but he could have a huge year, played a lot of football. Brian Wesco had 700 yards, 5 touchdowns, and TJ Moore had 650 yards and 5 touchdowns. And what's not getting talked about enough is how much they improved over this season. Because Clemson, post T. Higgins, post, Amari Rogers, post that group, kind of had a little bit of a fall off. There wasn't the amazing pass catchers at Clemson. Clemson was no longer, the wide receiver or whatever you want to call it, right? That changed this past year when Antonio Williams, Bryant Wesco, TJ Moore all got there. All of a sudden now Clemson's wide receiver room is deep and it's loaded. Cade Klubnik, again, it's going to be a pass-heavy system with Garrett Riley and Cade Klubnik, not really a proven running back, like I've said in previous videos. And you have 4 wide receivers who had 650-plus receiving yards, 2 900-yard receivers, and one of them had 11 touchdowns. So I expect huge things from this offense. I think they're going to be one of the top 5 offenses in college football. I think they have a top 3 quarterback in college football, and all that just fumes these wide receivers, and I think they are the best wide receiver room overall in college football. Clemson's going to win a lot of games because they have such a good receiver room, such a good quarterback, and such a good offense overall. And yeah, Clemson Tigers are the number 1 wide receiver room in college football, and I'll stand by that. And with that being said, those are my top 10 rankings again. Just to recap, number 10, I have the Georgia Bulldogs. Number 9, I have the Indiana Hoosiers. Number 8, I have the Penn State Nittany Lions. Number 7, I have the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Number 6, I have the Auburn Tigers. Number 5 is Ole Miss. Number 4 is LSU. Number 3 is Ohio State. Number 2 is Alabama. And number 1 is the Clemson Tigers. Let me know what y'all think in the comments of who you think the best wide receiver in the country, or even the best wide receiver is. I think we all know it's Jeremiah Smith, but if you have a different opinion, let me know. And yeah, next video will be Baylor Texas A&M season previews. Rankings-wise, I may either do top 10 offenses or top 10 games. I don't know which one yet, but we'll get into that when we get there. Thank y'all for watching. Hope y'all enjoyed the video. See y'all.